Clubhouse.
Welcome back to the How Uncivilized podcast from a galaxy far, far away in the studio at, I don't know, Tashi Station or wherever we are. This is Paul.
Hey, Mark here. Good to be here with you in person, Paul.
In person. It's not that we don't know each other in person. It's just that we never see each other in person.
Post-pandemic, what?
Exactly. Here to talk about the 5th episode of Andor. This one is called The Axe Forgets. At first blush, I was really hoping that there'd be more action in this episode. However, upon some reflection and some rewatching, the depth of the characters and the parallels that they're making to each other and all the setup that's happening in this episode, I really enjoyed it. What did you think, Mark?
Yeah, I agree. I think, jumping into action would be, the Star Wars way. And that's what makes this one different. It was like that we got the calm before the storm. We got a lot of the tension between the rebels. I liked that playing out. I think there was a big theme of like PTSD. Mm-hmm. And because that title, The Axe Forgets, grabbed me right away. I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, what does that mean? And then they dropped us with the dialogue pretty quick into it where it was like,
the axe forgets, but the tree remembers.
Yeah.
That was cool.
It ties directly to Skeen and his brother, the former owner of a large crop of trees. You could see where that kind of that tree metaphor, allegory kind of stuff would be a big deal in his culture, his family. But when you start to spread that out to the whole rest of the story, you start to look for other axes and other trees, right? So like in some ways, Cyril is a tree and Andor was the axe that screwed up his life, right?
Yeah, good point.
There are other parallels here. Like I saw someone point out that this story really resembles a lot of the first Matrix movie, at least the journey that Neo goes on.
Oh, explain that. That's interesting.
Well, he has to give up his former life in order and kind of go all in with this new crew where there are different parallels, like Nemec is a lot like, not Dozer,
so the mouse analogy was right on.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. And Luthen is clearly Morpheus.
Yeah, and you have various people on the team that sort of make little parallels, except you got to wonder, is there a cipher?
Oh, good call, a cipher. And then he's interested in who Cinta is sharing a blanket with, perhaps. Something's happening there. There's a little bit of I think Vel figured out there's a crush going on there, so that could be Trinity.
Maybe.
If you will.
Maybe. Although my gut doesn't think Cinta's long for this show. But I don't know. That's why we watch the show, right?
Well, your gut is pretty good because you called the whole thing with Mon Mothma's husband. Because we got some more. We're jumping the gun. But I was like, oh, man, Paul nailed that one.
That guy and daughter. Ah, man. I mean,
no respect.
Exactly. As people who grew up in the 80s, you and I probably share this image of Mon Mothma as this stoic leader who no one in that room of rebels carrying blasters, they're admirals, they're generals, they are Princess Leia, no one would give this woman lip.
Mm-hmm. She's hardcore. Yeah.
But then here she is with her family and they are complete dicks to her. And maybe they're even right. The idea of the daughter sort of being like this window dressing to help her political career.
You're only doing it to show off. What? Just go.
She didn't defend that point in a way that was like, she just said, oh, that's hurtful.
That's just so hurtful.
See? There you go.
But she didn't necessarily say, you're wrong. No way, Jose. I love my daughter and my, robe-wearing husband. This is appalling. No, she didn't say that exactly. Oh, just that's hurtful.
She's like got the absentee parent thing going on, but at the same time, the guy seems like very superficial.
Yeah.
Like he's going with the flow.
Likes being married to an important person, perhaps.
But yeah, exactly. But we could talk about that scene when he basically was like, oh, I was talking to so-and-so. I don't know if that Gar something or other.
You saw me talking to Gar Tuffy.
You're busy tonight.
Is that someone we know? He said he was talking to Gar Toffeed?
I'll admit that I watched Star Wars Theory before
Okay.
preparing for this podcast, and
Like
that guy doesn't know who he is. Although
Nobody.
it's, right.
Yeah, if he doesn't know, nobody knows. Okay. But yeah, he said that this person was telling about the foundation. He's like, what's up with this foundation?
Yes.
So clearly, I would guess this is how she's siphoning funds through some sort of fake charity shell company.
I got the same feeling.
Did you get the feeling? And he
It
was
seems
like,
late in the game to be creating like an owl sanctuary foundation. or
yeah.
something.
And he was very much like, how come you didn't tell me about this? And she was,
Right,
and
it's
then she
charitable.
tried to, yeah, she tried to talk it off, spin it off. But that's some good tension right there.
Are these two, can they get with the program? Are they just making her too vulnerable? Do they have to exit in some way in order to let Mon Mothma be who she needs to be to lead the rebellion? I personally think they're too far off program. I mean, I understand that we're creating, instead of characters, we're trying to see these people as like people, as opposed to a lot of Star Wars shows where it's archetypes or whatever. But they're going a long way to show us people here. So it's tough to say, just cast off those jerks. But I don't know. I mean, this is bigger than them.
You got to think the risk is going to get at some point too high, and she's going to have to exit stage left and just go all in with the rebellion.
Yeah.
And at their various rebel bases, I guess Dantooine, is that where that's one.
That's one.
That
It's
we see.
deserted by A New Hope, but yes.
So maybe there's some catalyst that brings her to exiting. And maybe you're right. Maybe the Empire is ruthless enough to bring her family into it. They're spying on her. I think they might give us that in the show. We'll see.
Well, you recall in A New Hope, Tarkin comes in and says, the Emperor's done away with the
Imperial Senate.
The Imperial
He did
Senate.
It. He finally did
The
it.
rebellion will continue to gain a support in the Imperial Senate.
The
as long-
Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us. I have just received word that the Emperor has dissolved the Council permanently. The last remnants of the old Republic have been swept away.
So I wonder what that looks like, because we know how he gets rid of things. It's usually a cleansing.
The Night of the Long Knives type deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, you never know.
So does Mon Mothma read the writing on the wall and get out of there while the getting's good? Obviously she does, because she survives to Return of the Jedi. And if you've read both Legends and Disney era books, she goes on. I think she becomes the leader of the New Republic in both iterations of the galaxy. But what happens to the senators and how she makes that exit, I'm going to be interested to see. I know, like, early on, Star Wars received some criticism for, well, who cares about the politics in Star Wars? Well, I think as fans like us get older, we're starting to.
It's a little bit relevant, a little bit interesting. It's interesting to see how that stuff plays out. And I know, like, I think it was Revenge of the Sith, Yoda or Obi-Wan, or maybe it was Bail Organa, say, the Emperor doesn't have enough control to dissolve the Senate. Because they were going to sneak in and turn off the message that was the trap to lure Jedi into the temple. It's like, they don't have that. But that's what they're trying to do as an empire, right? You see the annexation of the...
Morlana, right.
Yeah, exactly. So we're in the middle of that power grab.
Right. Even though they were the Republic and they kind of changed names, they changed uniforms, that apparatus is still there that existed with the same kind of people in charge, and so they're swapping out, I want my guy in charge, that era of things. But like you're pointing out, they're not, quote unquote, the empire that we know from A New Hope and that era of the story yet. They're still getting that authoritarian control over everything.
And that's the genius of George Lucas. I mean, he took the 20th century that he grew up in and said, I want to tell a story about how does someone like Hitler or something come to power? And that's, Palpatine. How do they manipulate in the back rooms politically to pull something like that off? And he spun such a spider web, like literally the imagery in the Death Star, looks like a spider web because Palpatine is just engineering all this stuff. And then you get into the backstory of the Sith and their plan of revenge. And so I love that we're seeing a smaller story, but it's in the context of Palpatine up here doing his thing.
Well, with the Luthen's little bit of story here, how he's very nervous. Did you happen to notice, as a side comment, that he had both a Jedi holocron and a Sith holocron just next to each other on his shelf?
I didn't notice that, but I did watch Theory's recap, and so I saw, I missed that. So that is cool. Very interesting. They look big, though.
They looked bigger than I would have
big, yeah.
thought. So maybe they're artistic representations of those things. I mean, we know from past interviews that Tony Gilroy does not come to the universe as a Star Wars fan. He has had to study up.
Prop department might have messed that one up.
Well, or just, this isn't a Jedi story. I don't know. I'm just conjecture. They're not as important. They're just very cool to notice in the background, though, because they could have done more depth of field. They could have made that fuzzier.
Speaking of that scene, he said, you got your bug out bag ready, basically.
Basically, yeah.
On the Fondor. And that was one of the, I don't know, is that a planet? Do you know?
It is a planet, but I guess that's the name of his ship, perhaps?
See, I was wondering, because Dedra, is it Dedra? Okay. She's making the connections about the rebels. And she mentioned they've had all this stolen equipment.
Too random to be random? Yeah.
Yeah, too random to be random. That was awesome.
I know this. If I was them, this is how I'd do it. I'd spread it out. Never climb the same fence twice.
It's too random to be random.
But she mentioned a bunch of planets, and she mentioned Fondor as well. The same name. And I was like,
that is an important planet in Star Wars. You notice they keep mentioning Hosnian Prime also?
Yeah, what's the deal? What is the background on that?
Well, Hosnian Prime is in the sequel era of an important planet because it's one of the planets where the government, the New Republic, resides in like a rotating basis, right? So they didn't want to have another Coruscant. They wanted lots of planets to feel involved in the new government. So
that's a system that got blown up in the sequel trilogy.
It is because that is where, if you notice when Starkiller Base shoots and all the rays kind of diverge, they're all going to those planets where the government had been set up. But the current iteration was actually on Hosnian Prime. So they blew up Hosnian Prime with all of the leadership on it in that era. So here it's still relevant because it still exists, but I think it's meant to be kind of an Alderaan, a nice place. People want to go there. They got industry. They've got things people want. They got a high, medium, and low class people. It's not meant to be one of the one note, we only manufacture, we're only a desert planet, whatever. I think it's meant to be like a place people want to be.
Okay. If we parse her other planets that she mentioned or systems, what have you.
You're onto something. Kessel. Fondor. Targeting consoles from Jakku. Proton warheads from Base K. The Steerguard Star Path.
She mentioned Kessel. And I was thinking, wasn't the Solo movie where they stole the spice in the infamous Kessel run?
Yeah.
I was wondering, is that what she's referring to? The stolen spice on Kessel?
The timeline here, Mark sees me kind of searching my mental data banks as I look up into my brain.
Searching the HoloNet.
This is only 5 BBY. Solo takes place 10 to 13 years BBY. So that stuff would have happened.
That would have been a while ago then.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's shortly after the Clone Wars.
Not right after, but, enough. The Empire is in charge, for sure. But Kessel has always been the source of the spice that is both like a illegal drug and then also something, I guess, legitimately useful. And in every iteration, it's always been surrounded by multiple black holes that make it difficult to get to. So the idea of a Kessel run has always been a safe, fast route through the black holes rather than getting sucked in and, no one ever hears from you ever again. There's always been a mine there, I guess. And that's part of the...
And spice is valuable.
Yes.
They also mentioned the star path from the box that we saw from Steerguard.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wait, and then I was noticing the credits and the actor that plays Luthen is...
Stellan Skarsgård.
Skarsgård. Yeah. I was like, I wonder if they threw that in.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Maybe that was one of his conditions of joining the project.
You got to name a gadget after me.
Kind of like, what was it? Was it Jon Stewart? We were talking about Jon Stewart a minute ago before we started this. Was it him that asked George Lucas, what planet is Obi-Wan Kenobi from? And he said, he's from Stewart. Because he named the planet after Jon Stewart. And I might be wrong. It might not have been Jon Stewart, but I think it was.
I had not heard that, but that's funny.
Yeah, it's funny.
Because George has elements that he is very, for sure, I have written this in stone. This is the way it is. This is Star Wars to the core. And there's other parts where it's like, I don't give a shit, whatever.
Yeah, I'll make something up right here. But, maybe we'll get Kenobi's brother come into the picture sometime in one of these stories since they dropped that on us. Yeah.
I see here that Fondor is a manufacturing hub for the Imperials. It is orbital shipyards. So a very important manufacturing planet where they don't want things to go missing or wrong. Anyhow, that scene with Luthen at the end there when his helper is essentially saying, we can't affect it. You need to stop worrying and it'll all be over by this time tomorrow.
There's nothing else you can do, Luthen. They're either going to be okay out there or they're not.
What? That's a daring prediction.
And his response is like, actually, if it happens, it's all starting.
Yeah, that was a great line.
Tomorrow.
It'll all be over this time tomorrow.
Or would it just be starting?
Or that?
And then you're like, okay, so this probably in Rebel lore is significant, right? They made this payout might be so big that it jumpstarts the entire rebellion because we know that they're kind of strapped for cash.
Yes, there's
right
that.
now.
And we don't know how far they've gotten. We don't know who our allies are yet. From Rogue One, there's that scene where there's all those decision makers standing around the table at Yavin trying to decide what to do. Some are like, I don't want to go. And people are like, no, we got to go. But most of the voices are like, no, it's not time yet.
Right.
And a lot of those guys are kind of young and the unnamed, at least in the scene. You could probably find out in like IMDb or whatever. But who are those people and when do they come in? What do they bring with them? Why do we care that they're there? We don't need just random guys. We need guys with small armadas, manufacturing plants, weapon manufacturers, that kind of thing. But how do those things start to line up and when do they start to line up? Well, like you said, maybe right now. They've only been like taking names on an interest list so far, but without actual money.
I like this concept of the circle too. You would imagine that people in the circle are running multiple kind of cells out there. And then they maybe eventually kind of come together when Mon Mothma leaves, for example, and become more organized and more centralized, I guess. Whereas right now they're really spread out. But we learned that he's worried that Andor could be tied back to him.
Bel's the only one who traces back.
No. The thief, Andor. I wasn't careful.
You wanted this to happen. This is what it took.
I didn't really catch exactly how he could be tied back to him. I guess maybe he was seen.
That's true. We know that there is some level of surveillance. We saw the Primor security running the kind of the flight paths and all that kind of stuff, but that doesn't mean they can't have cameras and that kind of thing. We know like on the Death Star, they shot out the cameras, so they must be using cameras. That'd be the only way because he has the disguise. He's on Coruscant. He's just worrying. I mean, this is a big deal. I was interested to see that they actually had physical cash, like those. Oh yeah, those cylinders.
Have we seen that before? I want to say that's familiar, but maybe not. Credits. Yeah, we've seen credits.
We've seen just little pocket change almost. We haven't actually seen what it looks like when you have a sector's payroll in physical, denominations.
Gold bars in Star Wars.
Basically, yeah, which is, a little weird. Because this is Star Wars, what is that line of what makes it fantasy, what makes it technologically beyond us, but then also what kind of makes it the Old West, which has always been there? Why wouldn't there be physical cash? This is almost like a holdup,
Yeah, and cash has the ability, is the characteristic of being anonymous, and in a world where the Empire is starting to be the surveillance state.
Yeah, narratively, you need that anonymity for the cash.
Mm-hmm. Did you catch when they said they were going to turn Adari's the planet into a
Aldhani?
Aldhani, thank you, Aldhani. Man, my names are off. Talk about into a airbase. Did you catch that? Like they were talking about changing it up there. I didn't catch what they were trying to do. This was when Gorn was there
talking to the corporal. Can you believe they're going to tear it all down? That conversation.
Yeah.
Well, we know that this is a viable hub for moving things throughout this part of the galaxy. We know that they've been moving the indigenous people away. Perhaps this facility is too small to do what they want to do. That'd be my guess. Given what we know is about to go down, that could go either way. They may be like, nah, forget this planet. Or they might be like, no, we need to double down. We need to make this a really big installation.
I like that kind of acting that Gorn did to try to still be the, hardcore Imperial commander, but at the same time, when he manipulated some of his subordinates, he gave a little bit of a smirk, I tricked him.
I was going to mention that, part of our podcast format here is mentioning our high points and our low points. And I think my favorite stuff was all Gorn especially once we got his backstory and we did start to see, now we know he's acting as an Imperial, even though he doesn't feel like an Imperial anymore. So he knows how to be a dick, obviously. So, and he's just using that, but he's not of the dick anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You got to wonder how he got connected with the rebels, like how that came about.
It's very thorough, you know, how he's like, you can't see the thing tomorrow because I'm going to have you paint this. And he knows he's going to cave on that, but he's got to keep up appearances.
Mm-hmm.
I want it painted the day after tomorrow. I'll be here midday and I expect to see it shine.
Absolutely,
sir. Make sure the men know how close they've come.
Okay, fine, whatever, but you got to paint it early in the morning. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed seeing that acting, like you just mentioned, from Gorn.
Yeah, this build-up episode. I know some people were thinking, hey, this is a little bit slow. There hasn't been a ton of action, but it's going to be on the next episode, I would imagine. It's going to be go time, and there should be all action, I bet, this next episode.
Me too. But we needed some of this stuff. I could argue that you might have been able to compress the distrust and the motivations into maybe last week, maybe. But they spread it out. They gave everybody their due. They created this and then dismissed this concept of like, well, what are your reasons for supporting the rebellion? Are they good enough? Do they match up with mine? Do I think that they're okay?
Yeah, there was a whole lot of that. Maybe a little too much.
But then they settled on, it doesn't matter. You're here.
Yeah.
That's good enough for what we're doing.
And Andor called him out for being scared.
Yeah.
And he also realized they needed him because he, as a pilot, he realized he's the only one that knows certain things to make the mission a success.
Do you think he was BSing?
Well, he lied when he told his backstory, but he just knows that they need him and he could tell they're scared.
Well,
and
there's
so
that.
He called him out. And then that was interesting how he told him the truth. Because he realized they could sense there was something off. So that
I was going to ask you, like if you were Andor in that spot and you know that these are all believers for one reason or another, whether it's personal revenge, whether it's philosophical, you know, I hate this and I want to change it. You know, they all seem to have their own reasons. Being a mercenary.
I'm being paid. Paid to be here. You need to know? That's it.
What?
Yeah, I'm here for the money.
Doesn't quite stack up.
Kind of frowned upon.
Right. But on the other hand, if he doesn't say anything, then the distrust just kind of builds, right?
Yeah, and so he knows that to be successful, they have to cut this infighting. So I think telling the truth was a good call, especially he got the skiing figured out, found the kyber crystal.
Yeah.
So he's like, what the heck is this? That was a cool scene, and you see the smarts of Andor. Now they're ready to go.
He's an interesting character in that it's probably been said elsewhere in fewer words, but he's not great at anything. He's a little good at a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you see, especially say like superhero movies or something like that, once they go through their training montage, they turn into God by the end of the movie, you know, and I don't think he's ever going to be that. He can make hard decisions when he needs to. That's probably his greatest asset.
And being cool under pressure. He seems really good at that.
Yes. But is he probably the best shot with a rifle? Is he, you know, any number? Is he going to be the best pilot? Is he going to be able to figure out this weird slingshot thing on the dot the first time? I kind of doubt it. Is he going to get him aloft? Probably. Is he going to be rough? I bet so.
You know, when he was going to all the trouble of hiding the kyber crystal, I just got the sense that maybe back to the Morpheus thing, I think he might be loyal to Luthen now. He might be like a mentor to him. And he took that comment about
now
getting,
that is Star Warsy.
Very Star Warsy. Get that kyber crystal back to him. He asked for it. He said he gave him a mission. Mm-hmm. And I think he wants to fulfill that mission. I think he likes Luthen. He wants to be like Luthen. He eventually becomes like Luthen.
You could even see where that treasure might turn into, in lieu of payment, I'll just hang on to this and go on another mission and we'll settle up later, mm-hmm. you know, like that sort of thing. Because at a certain point, we know our boy's going to see the cause. He's going to want to be with the cause.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, as someone that's grown up with Star Wars and the idea of being someone that questions authority and wanting something better than the current government, that's a funny place to be as an adult, you know, who actually lives in a real world with a real society. But we've had this training from early on to like respect that idealism, you know. It's a funny place to be, and this is like a great story that's pointing out to me as just a human that's still worth doing. You know what I mean? You know.
Yeah, like the ideals versus the cold, hard reality stuff. And
Yes.
Star Wars is good at that. Yeah,
Yes.
you get both.
Well, it's better in this iteration than others. You know, some that feed my need to see jetpacks and lightsabers and cool stuff like that. So we're not going to get that here, but we are going to get that part where you're thinking about it later. Like, can I rationalize the decisions? Can I see why he made that? Yes, I kind of can.
Yeah, Mandalorian's way more of like a fantasy story almost feeling, whereas this is more grounded.
Yeah. I stand by my like 70s cop thriller.
Yeah. And speaking of the 70s, did you notice that we're calling the mouse character guy, the mouse guy?
The manifesto author?
Yeah. I liked how he was kind of like all over the place like that. And then he also brought out the old school 70s tech, and he kind of explained why they use that old school tech that looks very retro.
Mm-hmm.
One of the best navigational tools ever built. Can't be jammed or intercepted. Something breaks, you can fix it yourself.
Hard to learn.
Yes, but once you've mastered it, you're free.
Because it gets around the Imperial tech, which is more, high tech. They're using cheaper stuff. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Because it ties into the practical reality of when they made episode 4, mostly in England, they had all this weird 70s, technology that they made to look like Star Wars. Just like how they had mustaches in Rogue One, and they're like, the way they talked was very 70s.
An eagle-eyed person has called out that navigation device as a dressed up like Polaroid camera from the 70s.
That's what it looked like.
Yeah. Which, if you don't know, I mean, Star Wars has been dressing up items from our world since the beginning. I mean, if you look at the rifles they were carrying, those were marginally dressed up
AKs.
Submachine guns.
Yeah.
The communicator that Obi-Wan uses in episode 1, everybody knows that was a lady's shaver.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh,
and then this
funny.
is a polar. I mean, this is very on theme.
Yeah, and the original lightsaber was like a flashbulb holder case or like a handle.
Yeah, just kind of dressed up with little bits and bops on it. So I'm not at all disappointed to learn that is a Polaroid camera, just painted black with some doodads on it. But his argument resonates today in unexpected ways. Maybe not with, say, the government for me per se, but like you and I offline, we're talking about our affinity for virtual reality products, right? Mm-hmm. But the best ones right now are tied to a company that has some decision making that we're not 100% comfortable with, right?
And surveillance state type stuff like
exactly.
Like the Empire.
And so he's making this argument, well,
Sorry,
if you know how to use this other thing, then you're free. But you have to go out of your way to learn how to use it.
It's not going to be as convenient.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's sort of like the same sort of argument that you get with these other products. I like where the messaging can reflect our world, but not hit you over the head with, I'm talking about this, not so obvious. It's more in reflection where it's like, I could kind of make that parallel.
People say, oh, just fiction, just stories. Well, stories are how we learn and decide what we believe in, what we want to do, and things like that. So that's cool. Getting deep today, Paul.
We are. It's the face-to-face aspect of recording in the studio, probably. All right, so we've talked a little bit about Aldhani. Interesting to know, Skeen is a prisoner from multiple jails. Sort of like the backstory with Andor, where he describes his history as a fighter, and Luthen is like, you were a cook and you ran away, but you survived, so you get, partial credit. He's like, I can see you're a prisoner. And Skeen's like, where did you do time? He's like, well, actually, I was in juvie. So it's like every time he says something, it's like, well, it's not ideal, but it's giving me street cred. But if you dig a little, it's not exactly what I was saying.
It's another callback to The Matrix. There's that line where you have to fight someone before you truly know them.
Yeah, right.
And so these guys have fought each other and they've now come on the other end of it. And they're bros now. They're big time bros.
Do you have any more on Aldhani?
I mean, not really. I thought it was cool that their campsite was a mock-up of the target. I didn't catch that before. And he was like, okay, look, that was smart.
Smart, and the models, so much care was put into making them. You can tell that when Nemec dies, it's going to just rip our guts out because he's really been like the heart of this group. He's put so much care into why he's there, what he's doing, taking care of everybody else, making sure they're prepared.
It's really obvious he's going to die unless the writers try to pull something on us because everybody knows that,
I've not seen anyone predict that he's going to survive the attack. No. Like I said before, the Gorn stuff, the lost love, all that stuff. Once you find out that he loved an indigenous person and that ended badly, we're not 100% sure what badly means, but in the Empire way of thinking, she's probably a goner. But then the little scenes where like the Imperials are doing target practice on the little stone chapel, or they're referring to the way that they smell and that kind of stuff. And he's kind of gritting his teeth and barking out Imperial shit back at them. But now
you always have to demonize the people you're oppressing and make them
it helps.
To be
it helps.
Other than human.
It's in the book. Right?
Yeah, it's in the playbook. And so the fact that they brought that in, I thought was good writing.
We've talked a little bit about Mon Mothma and her bit. I kind of did and kind of didn't need to see the dinner with Sly more, mostly because this is a legacy character from the movies. She has been on the dais with Palpatine and Maz Amedda before. There's only 3 people on the dais. So this third person that we know as movie viewers almost nothing about. She's been expanded on in, I guess, books and comics and stuff like that. But if you're not totally down for that stuff, all you know is there's this very important person that was in a political enemy's house, Mon Mothma's. I kind of wanted to know how that went down.
I didn't know much about that character, and I kind of learned a little bit. And now it's like Darth Maul stole her from her homeworld, kidnapped her, and then Palpatine then pretended to rescue her. Like, that's perfect Palpatine. And then essentially they had a love child together. There's a Triclops.
Whoa.
Dude's got like a third eye. And I'm like, oh, bring him in. That sounds like this weird Sith with like a third. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm in.
Whoa, I had no idea, Sly, you dog.
Leave us.
Good one. Exactly. We're going to get down. Yeah, I guess that's it for Mon Mothma. I guess I did want to know how that dinner went, but I guess it's not important in the overall scheme. Just know that her husband created this highly uncomfortable situation. He's not on board. And so what's going to happen with them?
Yeah, it set up the fact that he's down with those folks and she's not. And then now he hears this thing about the Foundation, and something's going to come of that.
Exactly. Is he going to start poking around in there? Does that make him vulnerable? Not that anyone would miss him if she needed to have him done away with, but that exit from proper public life as a senator, transitioning to rebel leader 100%, we know has to happen. It's way too early for that to happen, but we're starting to see those building blocks of how she can get there. Let's go talk about Cyril Karn, former deputy inspector, part-time super low level resident of Coruscant. I saw on someone's summary video, they pointed out that the sunlight that reflects on his face in his quarters is probably not direct sunlight. It's probably reflecting off of another shinier building and coming down into the depths. These scenes are painful to watch. I kind of amend my story last week where I was thinking, well, maybe he wanted a job with the Empire and it didn't quite work out. So he goes and gets the best thing he can, but it's off planet. I'm thinking now, you want to get the F away from Mom.
For sure. Yeah, he's just in the 7th circle of hell right now, eating with his blue milk Cocoa Puffs and all this.
Yeah, that looked like maybe tricks or something. But yeah, the blue milk they put the camera on. Hey, look at that blue milk. Yeah, that's the most fan service we're going to get in this show, I think, is blue milk. Who is Uncle Harlow?
You think he works for the Empire?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. In what aspect? I don't know. That the fact that he had any commentary on Cyril's aptitude for police work is the only little bit of information we got about him. There's also the aspect of Cyril thinking that they've had such little contact with Harlow ever since something. Why would he even take Mom's call? Maybe he was on their level and became a big deal. Not so big a deal that he can move them out of the lower levels of Coruscant. But, he's doing fine for himself. He can put your name at the head of the line in HR. And that does spell Empire to me.
the biggest employer out there.
Exactly. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, biggest employer. And we need him back in the game. Because if he's going to be the arch nemesis or come back up in the story with Andor, that would be convenient.
He's the tree. He remembers. He's living with Mom, the 7th level of hell, like you just said. Because the axe just screwed up his life and left. He doesn't care anymore. He can't think of that guy's face. He just took his gun and left, you know? Or maybe he didn't, but still, you get the idea. Like, he doesn't care, but here he is living with Mom in his room with his action figures on the desk.
That's his personal rebellion, as Bell said.
Exactly. How he figures in, I mean, obviously he's going to come gunning for him, but the timing's not quite right yet. So is it like he's going to make it a personal vendetta type aspect where he's going to make his way on his own to try to find him? Or does Harlow install him in some position where he can do that quasi-officially? Still yet to be seen. I'm super curious because they spent 3 or 4 scenes on it of the same flavor scene where we just get this idea like this mom does want the best for him. It's just the way she gets there. Oh man, that would be terrible to live with.
It's going to be cool.
Okay, so my big high points for this episode go back to just the levels of characterization. Even though some characters didn't get a lot of screen time, we did get their names mentioned, or we did get them on screen just a little bit to see what they did. You know, not so much Tamarin, not so much Cinta this time around. Tamarin, for instance, it seems like he knows how to run the drills for them to a certain extent, but not knowing about having your firing arm on the outside of the formation and getting called out on it and not being a dick about it, just being like, hey, let's okay, fine. Maybe did he serve a little while, or was he maybe in like a, I don't know, volunteer unit? How does he know this stuff? He's a little bit of a curiosity, but I still think he's dead meat. Cinta, I don't even know if she spoke this week.
Yeah, we have a mystery, like they're going off, Vel and Cinta, as part of the mission plan.
Yeah.
They're going off to do something. I don't think we know what that is, right?
No. If those 4 guys are going to be in disguise, trying to mix in with the garrison, then I would assume that they need to be going in underground, you know, trying to get into the base some other way.
Maybe meeting up with Gorn and he'll let them in, and then they'll...
Right. If they're going to be like Shawshanking their way in there, you know, like sewers or access tunnels, maintenance tunnels, something like that.
Nice reference, Paul.
Right. Yeah. Because they need to be on that ship when it leaves. Maybe they've got to sabotage something. Maybe
they did say Gorn will be in the front. So so he won't, they'll have to, maybe he'll leave a door open or something like that.
Do something with power, security, something. They've got to do something to that level so that the guys in disguise can do their thing and not get caught right away. That's my guess. But they didn't really tell us. They said, it's not for you to know. And we're with Team Andor, so I guess we don't get to know. Low points, just that there was no action, but I'm not a baby. I can wait one more episode. High, low favorite for you, Mark?
I mean, we've pretty much touched on it all. I liked the feuding happening. I liked the politicking. I liked the setup, the tension building, the sort of PTSD analogy situation, the depth that's being created in the story. But yeah, I'm ready for the action. I really am. Let's do this thing, Paul. Episode 6.
Right now, I'm predicting Nemik, Tamarin, Vel, Cinta. I think they're all probably dead.
Oh.
Both girls, big guy, mouse. I think they're all
I
dead.
could see just Skeen and Andor surviving.
Yeah.
And their bros.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'll go with you on that prediction, but I think these writers are intentionally trying to mix things up.
We will have to look forward to our follow-up for next episode, the attack on the garrison at Aldhani, and we'll see how it shakes out. Like you mentioned originally, these are shot by the same director over spans of 3 episodes, so I wouldn't totally expect that attack and escape should spill over into episode 7. I think everything that's going to happen is going to happen.
Wrap up. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then we're halfway through the season?
Halfway through the season. We've got to probably meet up with Luthen again, get our bearings, figure out our loyalties, et cetera, et cetera. So super looking forward to how that goes down. If people wanted to find you on social media, where would they look, Mark?
Jiggy Nut, Twitter.
And I am at Paul V Daily or Pod Clubhouse on Twitter. And we'll look forward to hearing any feedback from anybody about anything on this podcast. Just let us know. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.
Pod Clubhouse.